Welcome to lesson 7.2 on exponential notation for powers of 10. Our objective today is how do we identify and compare numbers written in exponential notation. Now we talked about exponents some yesterday, but we're talking in particular about powers of 10 today. So let's get started so we can talk about and explain what that means. So powers of 10. When we look at a base and an exponent, which we looked at yesterday, remember the base is this number here and our exponent is the 2. And that does not mean 8 times 2, but instead it means 8 times 8. Let's listen to Mr. Brumfield as he explains powers of 10 to us. Seems like it's a little slow here right now, so hopefully it'll click in here quickly and we can get going on this. But powers of 10 are what they call it when we use 10. Oops, sorry. I'm having issues with my computer. Let's see what's going on here. Let me see if we lost our connection. Hang on one sec. Okay, here we go. We are getting him up and running now. We're having a connection problem. Okay, let's listen as he talks about powers of 10.
Today we are going to be reviewing exponents and powers. You should already know that an exponent is a raised digit that tells you how many times another number is multiplied times itself. When we work with the number 10, we don't really call them exponents of 10, we call them powers of 10. 10, 100, and 1000 are examples of powers of 10. We're going to look at a place value chart below. I want you to pay attention to the powers of 10, look carefully at the exponent, and the place value that it shows.
Okay, so let's look at that right now. So here's our place value chart that he was talking about. Trillions, we have trillions, billions, millions, or thousands, and then ones. But I want you to look at that because if I had a 1 in the trillions place, how many zeros is that? Well, if I count each of those place values, or each of the areas, I have 3, 6, 9, and 12. So a trillion would actually be 10 to the 12th power. So when I look here again, and it says how many periods are to the right. Now remember, every time we do this, a period is every comma. So 3, there's 1 period, 2 periods, 3 periods, 4 periods to the right of the trillions. Every one of these periods is separated by a comma. Okay, and then it says how many times will 10 appear in the repeated factor expression? Well, when you think about that, if we're writing 10 to the 12th power, we would have 10 times 10 times 10, 12 times. And then how many periods are to the right? And I just said, here's our 1 period, 2, 3, and 4, and so on. So let's continue on. So we're going to use our guides for powers of 10. And if you look at the chart above, it says billions, 100 millions, 10 millions, and millions, 100,000s, 10,000s, thousands, hundreds, tens, and ones. As you're looking at your student, or not your student reference book, but your journal, it says in our place value system, the powers of 10 are grouped into sets of 3. Ones, thousands, millions, billions, and so on. These groupings or periods are helpful for working with large numbers. When we write large numbers in standard notation, we separate these groups of 3 with commas, which is kind of what I just talked about. There are prefixes for the periods and for other important powers of 10. You know some of these prefixes from your work with metric systems. For example, the prefix kilo in kilometer identifies a kilometer as 1,000 meters. So use the place value chart for the large numbers and the prefixes chart to complete the following statements. So the prefix chart to the right, or that is on your page, if you look at tera, tera is actually the prefix for a trillion, and I said 10, that would be 10 to the 12th power. Remember, giga is billions, and they do go into tenths, hundredths, thousands, millions, and billions. You see kilo over there, which was what they talked about for 1,000. So if you take a look now at the chart, if I pull this over, the problems, Sorry, it's kind of sticking over here. So it says the distance from Chicago to New Orleans is about 10 to the third, or how many miles? Well, if we're talking about 10 to the third power, and I look over here, well, that means kilo or thousand. So that would be 1,000 miles. And then if I looked at a millionaire has at least 10 to the blank dollars, well, what does million stand for? And if I look over at my sheet, mega is million, and that's 10 to the sixth. So I would write a 6 in there, meaning 10 to the sixth power. So I want you to complete number 3, 4, and 5 in your journal. Use the chart that it gives you here, because that will be very helpful. And then we will talk about these problems in class, because we'll actually correct those and hand those in. And then finally, you should have a chart, and it says patterns and powers of 10. You should have a chart in your book, and it says find the patterns and complete the table below. It says do not use your student reference book, but that won't be a problem anyways because you won't have your student reference book at home. There's a pattern in each row going across if you look at it. We have millions, 100,000, 10,000, 1,000, 100, 10, and ones. And if you notice underneath it, I see ones and hundreds. To give you a hint what you're writing in the top boxes across. Then we have tenths, and then you would move over. So let's think about what you're writing here. I like the pattern down here as we're writing 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, or 10 times 10. Also, we have 10 to the fifth power. Again, look at your zeros. How many zeros do I have? That's really helpful when you are dealing with thousands numbers. Always count the number of zeros you're dealing with. It's kind of a trick, and it's really helpful. So let's take a look and review quickly as to what we were to accomplish in our lesson today. Our objective was how do we identify and compare numbers written in exponential notation. We listened to the video. We talked about our base and our exponent. We talked about trillions being 10 to the 12th power, and you looked at this chart at the bottom. Finally, your homework then was to do numbers 3, 4, and 5 in your journal. Use the chart. The chart is very, very helpful. It will help you with these problems if you can't remember. And finally, you have one other chart you need to complete for tomorrow, the boxes, and that will help if you have your journal page with you. And then it says describe at least 3 patterns that you see in the table. What are the patterns? You can talk about exponents, exponential notation, powers of 10. All of those things would be patterns that you can notice and write down. Great job of listening. Hopefully you took some good notes or wrote down all of the answers you needed to bring in for your homework. Have a great evening.